"Your girlfriend put something in your daughter's food," shouted the 7-year-old son of the housekeeper. The millionaire froze. Subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The afternoon sun in March streamed through the large windows of the architecture office in Westwood, Los Angeles, casting golden reflections on the plans of the urban project that David Anderson was finalizing. His hands, once steady and precise while drawing, now trembled slightly as he signed the documents. At 42, the renowned architect carried the weight of a loss that seemed to drain all the energy from his existence. "Dad, you forgot again." Emily's voice echoed down the hallway of the duplex apartment, bringing David back to reality. At 15, the teenager had inherited her mother's green eyes and her father's determination. But since Sarah's death 6 months ago, her gaze had lost the sparkle that once enchanted those who knew her. "Forgot what, Em?" David placed his briefcase on the kitchen island, watching his daughter absently scroll through her phone, leaning against the Italian leather sofa that Sarah had chosen with such care. The school meeting. The coordinator called 3 times. She said she needs to talk about my grades. Emily didn't lift her eyes from the screen, but David could sense the hurt in her voice. "You promised you'd be there after Mom." The sentence hung in the air, like so many others in recent months. David ran his hand through his graying hair, feeling the familiar tightness in his chest. The house, once filled with Sarah's laughter and the music she loved to play on the grand piano in the living room, now breathed silence and abandonment. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I've been so lost in work that—" He stepped closer to the sofa, but Emily abruptly stood up. "You're lost in everything, Dad. When was the last time we had dinner together? When was the last time you asked how I'm feeling?" Her words were laden with a pain that went far beyond her age. "I know you miss Mom, but I miss her too. And I'm still here." David watched his daughter ascend the stairs toward her room, each step echoing like an accusation. The 300-square-foot house, once his pride, now felt like a maze of memories and responsibilities he couldn't manage. The plants that Sarah had nurtured on the balcony were dying from lack of water. The fridge was nearly empty, and he could barely keep his own routine, let alone care for a grieving teenager. The next morning, while sipping his 3rd cup of coffee on an empty stomach, David answered the phone with a mix of hope and apprehension. On the other end, the firm voice of Lisa, his secretary for over 10 years, brought a possible solution. "David, I got some recommendations for housekeepers through the agency that Dr. August's wife suggested. One of them caught my attention. She has great references and experience with teenagers. She just arrived from Aspen." "Lisa, I don't know if that's a good idea. Emily is still very sensitive to any changes." David glanced toward the stairs, where he could hear the muffled sound of his daughter crying from her room. "Exactly for that reason, David. You both need help. It's not healthy to continue like this. The house is a mess. You're losing weight, and Emily— Well, yesterday she called here asking if you were okay, because you hadn't come home until 10 at night." David sighed, acknowledging the truth in Lisa's words. "What's she like?" "Claire Smith, 41 years old, widowed with a 7-year-old son. She has a degree in nutrition and worked as a housekeeper for a family in San Jose for 5 years. The references are impeccable, very organized, an excellent cook, and most importantly, she has experience dealing with families who have gone through losses." Lisa paused. "David, at least schedule an interview. What do you have to lose?" That Thursday afternoon, David anxiously waited in the living room when the doorbell rang. Through the intercom, a sweet, measured voice introduced herself. "Good afternoon. I'm Claire Smith. I'm here for the interview." When he opened the door, David was met by a woman of impeccable appearance. Claire was about 5'7", with straight brown hair tied in an elegant bun, wearing a navy blue blouse and well-fitted black pants. Her brown eyes conveyed seriousness and confidence, while a subtle smile lit up her delicate features. Beside her, a boy with dark hair and attentive eyes shyly hid behind his mother's skirt. "Mr. Anderson, it's a pleasure. This is my son, Ethan." Claire extended her hand firmly, her handshake conveying assurance. "Thank you for the opportunity to meet you. The pleasure is mine. Please come in." David stepped aside to let them pass, immediately noticing how Claire observed every detail of the house with professional eyes. "You can sit down. Would you like some coffee?" "That would be great, thank you." Claire settled onto the sofa with an upright posture, while Ethan remained close to her, his curious eyes exploring the luxurious surroundings. "What a beautiful home. I can see the care in every detail of the decor." As David prepared the coffee in the kitchen, Emily came down the stairs. Dressed in an oversized sweatshirt and with messy hair, the teenager paused upon seeing the visitors, her expression immediately closing into a mask of distrust. Come meet Claire and Ethan." David returned with a tray, sensing the tension in the air. "Hi," Emily murmured, keeping her distance, her arms crossed in a defensive posture. Claire gently stood up, her smile remaining warm despite the cold reception. "Emily, what a pleasure to meet you. Your dad told me you're an excellent student. Ethan is almost your age. When I was a teenager, I can imagine how challenging it must be to balance school and, well, all the changes in life." "I'm 15, not 7, Emily replied dryly, looking directly at Ethan, who shrank even further behind his mother. "Of course you're right. I'm sorry if I sounded condescending." Claire maintained a gentle tone, but David noticed a different glint in her eyes. "Actually, I wanted to say that I understand how difficult it is when someone new enters our routine, especially after a loss." The silence that followed was interrupted only by the distant noise of traffic on Sunset Boulevard. David observed how Claire didn't seem intimidated by Emily's hostility, maintaining a calm and respectful demeanor. "Ethan, why don't you show your drawings to Emily?" Claire suggested softly. "He loves to draw architecture. When he found out we were going to meet a famous architect, he was fascinated." Ethan shyly pulled out a sketchbook from the small backpack he carried. Its pages were filled with detailed drawings of houses, buildings, and bridges, all done with colored pencils and impressive precision for a 7-year-old. "Wow, you draw really well," Emily approached, her curiosity overcoming her initial resistance. "This building here looks like the Copan building." "It does," Ethan exclaimed, his eyes lighting up. "My mom took me to see it when we arrived in Los Angeles. She said famous architects like your dad make buildings like that." David smiled for the first time in weeks, watching how the boy had broken the ice with his daughter. Claire noticed the moment and took the opportunity to address him. "Mr. Anderson, I would like to explain a bit about my experience and how I think I can help your family." During the next hour, Claire detailed her professional background with an eloquence that impressed David. She spoke about domestic organization techniques, balanced nutritional planning, and most importantly, her understanding of the challenges faced by families in mourning. "I believe a home needs to be more than just clean and organized. It needs to be a refuge where each family member feels welcomed and understood," Claire explained, her eyes alternating between David and Emily, who had sat on the floor to show more drawings to Ethan. When the interview came to an end, David felt something he hadn't experienced in months: hope. This woman seemed to have exactly what his family desperately needed: competence, empathy, and most importantly, the ability to bring life back into that house. "Claire, I would like to offer you the position. When could you start?" "Udutu." The smile she offered in response was radiant, and for the first time since Sarah's death, David believed that better days were ahead. A week later, on a sunny April morning, Claire and Ethan arrived at the residential building in Westwood, carrying 2 large suitcases and some boxes. The doorman, Mr. Johnson, a man in his 60s who had worked in the building for over 15 years, greeted them courteously. But David noticed the curious look he directed at the new resident. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson. The lady and the boy are already on the authorized list," Mr. Johnson said, helping with the luggage. "It's nice to see movement in the penthouse again. Mrs. Sarah always chatted with me when she passed by." David felt the familiar tightness in his chest upon hearing his wife's name, but Claire immediately approached the doorman with a warm smile. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Johnson. I'm Claire, and this is my son, Ethan. I hope we become good neighbors." "Ah, what a polite young lady." "It's been a while since I've seen such kindness around here," Mr. Johnson replied, clearly charmed. "If you need anything, just let me know." In the private elevator that led directly to the penthouse, Ethan watched, fascinated, as the numbers changed on the digital panel, while Claire nervously adjusted a strand of hair that had escaped her bun. David noticed that she was wearing a discreet business outfit, a beige blazer and matching dress pants that flattered her figure without being flashy. "Nervous?" David asked, trying to break the silence. "A little," Claire admitted, looking him directly in the eyes. "It's a big responsibility to care for a family that has been through so much. I want to make sure I do everything right." When the doors opened in the private hall of the penthouse, Emily was waiting for them, leaning against the doorframe. Unlike the previous week, she had made a visible effort. Her hair was styled. She wore a clean white blouse and dark jeans. David noticed that his daughter, despite her initial resistance, also felt the need for this change. "Hi, Ethan," Emily said, addressing the boy with a shy smile. "Do you want to see the room my dad set up for you? It has a nice view of the city." Ethan nodded enthusiastically, and David watched as Claire allowed her son to go with Emily, demonstrating a trust that reassured him. It was a good sign when a mother felt secure enough to let her child explore a new environment. "Claire, let me show you where you'll be staying." David led her down the main hallway of the house. The room he had reserved for her was at the end of the hallway, close to Ethan's room, but with enough privacy. It was spacious, with a queen-sized bed, a built-in wardrobe, and a small sitting area with an armchair and study table. "It's perfect, Mr. Anderson. Thank you so much," Claire said, placing her suitcase on the bed. "Can I start organizing the household routine today?" "Of course, but please call me David. And don't feel pressured to start immediately. I want you to feel at home first." Claire smiled, and David noticed how her face transformed completely when she smiled genuinely. "David, then. And you can just call me Claire. As for starting today, that would actually help me adapt better. Working has always been my way of feeling useful." Throughout the rest of the morning, David watched in fascination as Claire moved through the house with the precision of a general organizing her troops. She examined each room methodically, taking notes in a notebook. David pulled out a small notebook from his bag. Her questions were specific and practical: preferred meal times, dietary restrictions, cleaning routines, organization preferences. "David, may I suggest some changes to the kitchen layout?" she asked, opening cabinets and drawers. "A few simple reorganizations could optimize meal prep time." Feel free. Sarah always said I had no practical sense for these things," David replied, immediately regretting mentioning his late wife. Claire stopped what she was doing and turned to him with a gentle yet determined expression. "David, you can talk about Sarah whenever you want. She was Emily's mother and your wife. I don't intend to erase her memory from this house. In fact, I would like to know her better through you." The simplicity and honesty of her statement caught David off guard. In recent months, everyone around him seemed to avoid talking about Sarah, as if mentioning her name would reopen a wound. Having someone who not only allowed but encouraged those memories was liberating. By late afternoon, the aromas wafting from the kitchen pulled David from his work. It had been months since he had smelled home-cooked food in the house. When he went downstairs to investigate, he found a scene that moved him. Emily and Ethan sitting at the kitchen counter, she helping him with homework while Claire prepared dinner. "What a wonderful smell," David asked, approaching the stove where a pot was gently simmering. "Shrimp risotto with asparagus," Claire replied, stirring the rice with precise movements. "I hope you like it. It's a recipe I learned from an Italian family I worked for." "Ah, my dad loves shrimp," Emily said, looking up from Ethan's notebook. "Mom used to make it every Tuesday, but she didn't know how to season it right." David realized it was the first time in months that Emily spoke of her mother without visibly becoming sad. There was something about Claire's presence that made these conversations feel more natural, less painful. "Ethan, your handwriting is very good," Emily continued, examining the boy's exercises. "Much better than mine when I was your age." "My mum taught me. She says nice handwriting is important," Ethan replied, clearly proud of the compliment. During dinner, David observed how Claire guided the conversation naturally, asking questions about Emily's school, Ethan's plans for the holidays, and even about David's work. She showed genuine interest in the answers, and more importantly, managed to engage everyone in the conversation. "David, Emily told me you're designing a new cultural center in Silver Lake. It must be exciting to work on something that will benefit so many people," Claire commented, serving a second helping of risotto to Ethan. "It's a challenging project," David admitted. "I'm trying to incorporate urban sustainability concepts with full accessibility. Sarah always said architecture should be democratic." "She was right," Claire said simply. "Art and culture need to be accessible to everyone." After dinner, David offered to help with the dishes, but Claire kindly declined. "Let me handle it tonight. Tomorrow we'll talk about how to divide the chores." She turned to Emily. "Isa, do you have any preferences for breakfast tomorrow? I can prepare something special to start the week off right." Do you know how to make coffee cake?" Emily asked hesitantly. "It was Mom's favorite, but I could never get it right." "Of course I do, and I can teach you if you'd like. It can be our activity for Sunday morning." The smile that lit up Emily's face was the confirmation David needed that he had made the right decision. For the first time since Sarah's death, his daughter seemed genuinely excited about something. Later, in his room, David listened to the sounds of the house settling for the night. Soft voices in the hallway, water running, gentle footsteps. These domestic noises were ones he hadn't heard in a long time, and they brought a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in months. Before falling asleep, he thought about how happy Sarah would be to know that Emily was smiling again. And, for the first time since the accident, David was able to think of his wife without feeling only pain, but also gratitude for the happy memories she left behind. On that first night with Claire and Ethan in the house, David slept better than he had in months. He didn't yet know that this feeling of peace was just the first step of a journey that would prove to be much more complex than any of them could imagine. The first 3 months with Claire in the house passed like a dream that David never wanted to end. The transformation was as gradual as it was profound, starting with mornings that now carried the aroma of fresh coffee and homemade breads that she prepared before anyone else woke up. "Good morning, David." Claire greeted him promptly at 7 o'clock when he came down to the kitchen. She was already impeccably dressed, sometimes in a modest business dress, other times in tailored pants and silk blouses, and her hair always styled in elegant updos that accentuated her delicate neck. "The coffee is fresh, and I left your fresh squeezed orange juice in the fridge, just how you like it." David had grown accustomed to that morning routine. Claire had observed his habits in the first few weeks and, without him asking, began to anticipate his needs. The breakfast table was always set with fresh items, fruit cut into artistic shapes, assorted breads, homemade jams, and even small vases with flowers she cultivated on the balcony of the service area. "Claire, you don't need to go to so much trouble," David would often say, but she always responded with a warm smile. "It's not trouble when you love what you do. Besides, good nutrition is essential for professional performance." Emily, who in the first months after her mother's death could barely manage a complete breakfast, now came down promptly at 7:30, always finding her favorite meal prepared. Claire had meticulously studied Emily's preferences. Emily's tastes gradually evolved, and she began to enjoy more elaborate and nutritious dishes. "Emily, today I made those banana pancakes you loved last week," Claire announced one June morning, placing an artistically decorated plate in front of the girl. And there's a special smoothie with berries that will give you extra energy for your math test. You remember everything, don't you? Emily smiled, and David noticed how his daughter's face had regained color. The dark circles that had haunted her since her mother's death had disappeared, and she seemed more willing and cheerful. Ethan had become a constant and welcome presence in the family routine. The boy, with his natural curiosity and sweet personality, had completely won over Emily, who began to treat him like the younger brother she had never had. Every afternoon, when she returned from school, she found Ethan waiting for her in the living room with his sketchbooks and an eager expression. "Emily, look what I drew today!" Ethan ran towards her, his brown eyes shining with excitement. "It's the new building your dad is constructing." "Wow, Ethan, it's getting better and better," Emily replied, crouching down to examine the detailed drawings. "Do you want me to teach you how to use the drawing program on Dad's computer?" David watched these interactions with a mix of relief and emotion. Seeing Emily take care of Ethan awakened protective and maternal instincts in her that helped her cope with her own pain. The boy's presence filled a void in the house that he hadn't even realized existed. Meals had once again become special moments. Claire demonstrated exceptional culinary skills, preparing dishes that range from traditional American fare to sophisticated international cuisine. She had transformed the kitchen into her domain, organizing every utensil and ingredient with almost scientific precision. "How did you learn to cook like this?" David asked one afternoon, watching her prepare a herb-crusted grilled salmon that looked like it came from a five-star restaurant. "My mother was a cook at a bed and breakfast in Aspen," Claire explained, seasoning the fish with precise movements. "Since I was little, I helped her in the kitchen. Later, when I started working for families, I honed my techniques. I believe that food is a way to show love, and you show a lot of love," David said, feeling a strange emotion as he made the comment. Claire stopped what she was doing and looked him directly in the eyes. "You all deserve this, David. You've been through so much suffering. It's the least I can do to help in the recovery of this family." The house had completely transformed under Claire's care. She implemented a cleaning routine so efficient that each room always seemed immaculate, but without that artificial showroom feel. The plants that Sarah had cultivated not only survived but thrived under her care. She had studied each species, implementing a watering and fertilizing schedule that brought new life to the balcony. "Claire managed to make Mom's orchids bloom," Emily commented to David one afternoon, admiring the white and purple flowers that adorned the balcony. "She said they just needed a little more attention." David knew that his daughter's observation went far beyond the plants. They were all blooming again under Claire's careful attention. The evenings became special in a way that David hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. After dinner, when Ethan was already asleep, the three gathered in the living room. Claire always brought a special tea, chamomile with honey to relax, or lemon balm for digestion, and they talked about the day's events. "Dad, did you know that Claire studied nutrition?" Emily said one of those nights, snuggled on the couch with a cup of tea in her hands. "She explained to me why some food combinations make us feel better." "That's true," Claire confirmed, her legs elegantly crossed in the armchair where she sat. "Nutrition has a direct impact on our mood and energy. That's why I take such care in what I prepare for you." David began to notice that his own sleepless nights had drastically decreased. He who used to spend hours awake tossing and turning in bed now slept soundly and woke up refreshed. He attributed this to the sense of security that Claire brought to the house. Knowing that someone was taking care of all the details allowed him to finally relax. "David, you seem more rested," Claire commented one morning, serving him coffee. "Are you sleeping better?" "Much better. I think it's because I'm not worried about 1,000 things around the house when I go to bed," he admitted. "You've brought a peace that I didn't know was possible to regain." The smile she directed at him was different from the others, more intimate, warmer. "I'm glad to hear that," A home needs to be a sanctuary, especially after so much pain. Weekends became special events. Claire implemented traditions that quickly became sacred to the family. Sunday mornings were dedicated to cooking together. She taught Emily to prepare dishes that the teenager wanted to learn, while Ethan helped by measuring ingredients and mixing batters. "Ethan, you're an excellent sous chef," Emily laughed, watching the boy concentrate on cracking eggs without leaving pieces of shell. "When you grow up, you'll be a famous chef." "I want to be an architect like Uncle David," Ethan replied seriously, using the affectionate title he had naturally adopted. David watched these scenes from the kitchen counter, where he worked on his projects during the weekends. Claire's presence had brought life back to those spaces that had previously echoed, only with silence and melancholy. Gradually, David realized that he had begun to eagerly anticipate moments at home. His office, which had once been a refuge from domestic emptiness, now seemed less appealing than the conversations during dinner or the quiet mornings sipping coffee while Claire organized the day's agenda. "You're leaving the office earlier," Lisa commented one afternoon. "That's good. It was working too much." "The house is different now," David admitted. "There is life there again." It was true. There was life, there was laughter, there was hope, but there was also something more, something that David still couldn't quite name. An undercurrent of change flowing beneath the apparent perfection of the new family routine. At night, in the silence of his room, David sometimes found himself thinking about how Claire had become indispensable so quickly, how she could anticipate his needs, how she always knew exactly what to say to Emily, how she had brought order to the emotional chaos they lived in. It was immense gratitude, but there was also something more. A feeling he wasn't yet ready to examine closely, but that grew silently each morning when she greeted him with that warm smile, each night when their eyes met for a few seconds longer than necessary. For now, David was content to live that perfect routine, without questioning too deeply how it had become possible. After all, after so much time lost in darkness, who would question the arrival of light? It was during the 4th week of July that David noticed the first subtle change in Emily's behavior. At first, he thought it was just the typical fatigue from the school exam period, but gradually he realized there was something different about his daughter. "Emily, you barely touched your lunch," David commented one Saturday afternoon, observing the still full plate in front of the teenager. "Did you not like Claire's lasagna?" Emily slowly lifted her head, as if emerging from a deep dream. Her eyes, once bright and attentive, seemed slightly glazed, and it took her a few seconds to process the question. "Sorry, Dad, I'm just really tired." She rubbed her temples with her fingers, a gesture David didn't remember seeing her do before. "I think it's the exam period. I've been studying a lot." Claire, who was organizing the dishes in the kitchen, approached with a look of maternal concern. "Poor thing, you've really been working too hard. How about I make that special lemon balm tea that always helps you relax?" "That would be great, Claire." "Thank you," Emily smiled weakly, resting her head on her hand. David watched as Claire moved through the kitchen with her usual efficiency, preparing a blend of aromatic herbs in a special mug she had bought exclusively for Emily's teas. It was a fine porcelain mug, decorated with delicate flowers, which the teenager had adopted as her favorite. "Here you go, dear. Drink slowly. It will do you a world of good," Claire said, placing the steaming mug in front of Emily with an almost maternal tenderness. Ethan, who was playing on the living room floor with his building blocks, looked up curiously. "Emily, do you want to play with me later? I'm building an entire city." "Sure, Ethan. Just let me rest a little first," Emily replied, her voice sounding strangely drowsy. In the following weeks, these episodes of drowsiness became more frequent. Emily began to doze off on the sofa after meals, and her responses to conversations became slower and less insightful. David, concerned, scheduled an appointment with the pediatrician who'd been seeing his daughter since she was little. "Dr. Smith, Emily's been very drowsy. Could it be anemia? Or maybe some delayed effect of grief?" David asked during the appointment, watching Emily, who remained seated on the examination table, her eyes heavy. Dr. Smith, a 50-year-old man with graying hair and round glasses, examined Emily carefully. He measured her blood pressure, listened to her heart, checked her eyes and reflexes. "The physical exams are normal, David. Her blood pressure is good. There are no signs of anemia." The doctor turned directly to Emily. "How have you been feeling, Emily? Any pain, dizziness, changes in appetite?" "Just really tired, doctor. Even when I sleep a lot, I wake up feeling heavy," Emily replied, her voice low and dragging. Considering she lost her mother less than a year ago, it's possible this is a physical manifestation of grief. The body sometimes somatizes emotional stress this way," Dr. Smith explained, making notes on his clipboard. "I'll order some blood tests to rule out vitamin deficiencies or hormonal issues. But I believe that with psychological support and a good routine, she will recover." David felt relieved by the diagnosis. "She has been under excellent care. Our housekeeper is very attentive to her diet and routine. That's essential. Maintaining a structured routine and a balanced diet is the foundation of recovery," the doctor agreed. "I'll prescribe a vitamin complex and suggest she continues with activities that bring her joy." When they returned home, Claire was waiting for them in the living room with an anxious expression. Ethan was beside her, drawing in his notebook, but clearly paying attention to the adults' conversation. "How was the appointment? Did the doctor find anything?" Claire asked, approaching Emily and gently touching her forehead to check for fever. "Dr. Smith thinks it might be a manifestation of grief. He ordered some tests but said it's normal," David explained. "He prescribed vitamins and recommended keeping the current routine." "Thank goodness," Claire sighed in relief. "I was so worried. Emily is like a daughter to me now." The comment brought a faint smile to Emily's face, who moved closer to Claire and hugged her. "Thank you for taking such good care of me, Claire. I don't know what we would do without you." David watched the scene with emotion. The bond between Claire and his daughter had become genuinely deep, and he felt grateful that Emily had found a maternal figure to trust. Ethan, however, had stopped drawing and was watching his sister with a thoughtful expression that seemed strangely mature for his 7 years. His brown eyes moved between Emily and Claire as if he were processing something important. "Mom, why does Emily get sleepy after she drinks your special tea?" Ethan suddenly asked, his childlike voice cutting through the air. The emotional moment. Claire stepped away from Emily and looked at her son with an expression that David couldn't fully decipher. "What a strange question, Ethan. Lemon balm tea is relaxing. It helps reduce anxiety and stress. But when I drink tea, I don't get sleepy," Ethan insisted, furrowing his small brow. "You're a child, sweetheart. Your body reacts differently. Emily is a teenager. She has much more pressure and worries," Claire explained patiently. But David noticed a slight tension in her voice. "Ethan is right to be curious," David interjected, finding the boy's observation interesting. "But everyone reacts differently to teas. Your mother knows a lot about these things." Ethan nodded, but continued to watch Emily with that penetrating gaze that sometimes seemed disturbingly adult. In the following weeks, David began to pay more attention to the family habits. He noticed that Claire always prepared specific teas for Emily. In the morning, it was an energizing tea with herbs she said were rich in vitamins. At night, the relaxing lemon balm tea. Additionally, there was a special smoothie she prepared every morning, a creamy mix of fruits, yogurt, and supplements that Emily took religiously. "Claire, where do you get these smoothie recipes?" David asked one morning, watching her prepare the mixture with the precision of a pharmacist. "I learned during my nutrition course. It's important to balance nutrients according to individual needs," she replied, carefully measuring a spoonful of a white powder she took from an unlabeled jar. "Emily is in a phase of significant development. She needs proper nutritional support." "And what's that white powder?" "It looks pretty specific. It's a complex of amino acids and minerals that I buy from a compounding pharmacy. Very good for concentration and energy," Claire explained, stirring the smoothie until it was homogeneous. David found the explanation reasonable. Claire had always demonstrated impressive technical knowledge about nutrition, and the results were visible. Besides the occasional drowsiness, Emily seemed healthier than she had been in months. It was Ethan who made the next disturbing observation. One Thursday afternoon, while David was working on his projects at the desk in the living room, the boy approached with his sketchbook. "Uncle David, can I show you something?" Ethan asked, his small hands firmly holding the notebook. "Of course, Ethan. What did you draw today?" Ethan opened the notebook to a specific page. The drawing depicted the kitchen of the house with impressive details for a 7-year-old. But what caught David's attention was a small detail in the corner, a female figure putting something into a glass. "Is this drawing of our kitchen?" David asked, studying the details. "Yes, I drew it yesterday afternoon when I was playing here in the living room," Ethan replied, pointing to specific elements. "Look, this is the fridge, this is the stove, and this is my mom preparing Emily's tea." David looked more closely. In the drawing, the female figure held a small vial, and several drops fell from it into a mug. "Ethan, what is this that your mom is putting in the tea?" David asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Ethan looked at the drawing and then back at David with his big, sincere eyes. "I don't know. It's a little bottle she always takes from the high cabinet when she makes Emily's special tea. I thought it was liquid sugar, but she already puts in honey." David felt a strange chill run down his spine. He tried to remember if he had seen Claire use any specific vial besides the usual containers for spices and herbs. "Have you asked your mom what it is?" "No. She always tells me not to touch things in the kitchen when she's cooking," Ethan replied. "But I like to watch. She makes very precise movements, like a doctor." That night, during dinner, David watched Claire more closely. Her movements were indeed precise, almost medicinal, and when she got up to prepare Emily's nighttime tea, David noticed she opened a high cabinet, the one where she kept the rarest spices. "Claire, can I see what herbs you use in Emily's tea?" "I'm curious about these natural blends," David said, rising from the table. For a fraction of a second, David saw something he had never noticed before in Claire's eyes. A flash of surprise, perhaps even alarm. But she quickly recovered, smiling with her usual naturalness. "Of course. It's a blend I learned from a herbalist in Aspen. Lemon balm, chamomile, lemon verbena, and a few drops of a special valerian extract," she explained, showing the containers. David examined the bottles, all properly labeled. But there was something in the explanation that didn't completely reassure him. Perhaps it was paranoia, but a small seed of doubt had been planted in the architect's mind. That night, for the first time in months, David had trouble falling asleep. Ethan's words echoed in his mind, mixed with images of Emily's increasing drowsiness and the almost artificial perfection of the routine Claire had established. It was possible he was imagining things. After all, Claire had saved his family, brought order to chaos, and restored joy to that house. But a small voice in his mind whispered that perhaps it was exactly this perfection that should worry him. The month of August brought an unexpected change in the dynamics of the house, when Claire, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, gently knocked on the door of David's office. He was focused on the final projects for the cultural center, but looked up to see her standing in the doorway with a hesitant expression he had never seen before. "David, can I talk to you for a few minutes?" she asked, her hands nervously smoothing the skirt of the navy blue dress she was wearing. Her hair, usually tied in a perfect bun, was loose over her shoulders, framing her face in a way that made her look younger and more vulnerable. "Of course, Claire. Please come in." David saved the file on his computer and turned to her, noticing. As she seemed restless, Claire sat down in the armchair across from his desk, crossing her legs and intertwining her fingers in her lap. "Actually, I wanted to discuss a situation. A bit delicate, about Emily. She has been doing better lately," David said, genuinely concerned. "No, it's not about her. It's about our situation here." Claire took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "David, I know our family is adapting very well, but I've received some comments from the neighbors." David frowned. "What kind of comments?" Nothing serious, just remarks about a single woman living in a house with a single man. You know how people can be. She lowered her eyes, a subtle blush coloring her cheeks. Mrs. Johnson from the 12th floor asked the doorman some questions about our situation, and Mr. Thompson, embarrassed, told me. David felt a wave of irritation. That's absurd. Our situation is purely professional and familial. You take care of the house and the kids, period. I know that, and you know that. But people, they create stories. Claire raised her eyes, meeting his. The problem is that this could affect Emily. Teenagers are very sensitive to comments and gossip. Has Emily said anything to you? Not directly, but yesterday she asked if I had a boyfriend, if I intended to get married again. It was an innocent question, but I realized she is thinking about our dynamic here. Claire leaned slightly forward. David, the last thing I want is to cause any embarrassment for your family. David observed Claire closely. There was something in her posture, in the way she chose her words, that suggested this conversation was not as spontaneous as it seemed. But the concern for Emily was genuine, and he could understand the dilemma. What do you suggest? David asked. Well, I was thinking... Claire hesitated, lightly biting her lower lip. Maybe it would be better for me to look for another place to live. Ethan and I could move to an apartment nearby, and I would continue coming during the day to take care of the house and meals. The suggestion hit David like a punch to the stomach. The idea of returning to an empty house at night, of not having that feeling of a complete family that he had grown accustomed to, was unthinkable. No, Claire, that's not necessary. The words came out faster and more emphatically than he intended. You have become part of this family. I won't let malicious comments from neighbors destroy that. But David, I need to think about all our reputations, and especially about Emily's well-being. Emily is happy, happier than she has been since Sarah's death. Ethan is like a brother to her. David stood up from the chair, walking to the window that overlooked the city. I can't accept that you move out. Claire remained silent for a few moments, and when David turned around, he saw her watching him with an unreadable expression. David, she said softly, there is an alternative that would resolve all these issues. What? We could formalize our situation. The words came out low, almost whispered. A marriage would solve all the legal, social, and familial problems. David felt the world stop for a moment. Marriage. The word echoed in his mind, bringing a complex mix of emotions. Sarah had died only 10 months ago. Was it too soon? Was it wrong? But at the same time, the idea did not repulse him as he would have expected. Claire, I don't know what to say. You don't have to answer now, she said quickly, getting up from the armchair. I know it's a bold suggestion, but think, it would be good for the kids, for our stability, and it would resolve any social issues. And the feelings? David asked, surprising himself with his own question. Claire stepped closer to him, stopping just a few inches away. For the first time since they met, David felt a different tension in the air, an awareness of her physical proximity, the subtle perfume she wore, the curve of her lips. David, in the 10 months we've been together, we've developed mutual respect, affection, and a partnership that works perfectly. Many marriages have started with less than that, she said, her voice low and convincing. It wouldn't be a marriage born out of teenage passion, but out of compatibility, companionship, and love for the family we've built. David felt torn between reason and emotion. Logically, the proposal made sense. Claire had become indispensable for the functioning of the house and for Emily's well-being. Ethan was like a son to him. The idea of losing them was unbearable. I need time to think, he finally said. Of course. And please don't feel pressured. If you decide it's better for me to move out, I will understand perfectly. Claire gently touched his arm. I just want the best for all of us. That night, during dinner, David observed the family dynamic with new eyes. Emily was animatedly talking to Ethan about a school project, while Claire served the meal with her usual efficiency. It felt like a real, complete, and happy family. Dad, Claire helped me finish my geography project today, Emily said, smiling at the housekeeper. She has incredible creativity. That's true. Your daughter is very talented, David. With the right encouragement, she could become an excellent architect like you, Claire replied, casting a meaningful look at David. I really want to be an architect, Emily exclaimed. And Ethan can be my partner when we grow up. That would be quite a partnership, David smiled, but his mind was elsewhere, processing the afternoon's conversation. After the kids went to bed, David and Claire found themselves in the living room, as had become their custom. She prepared the usual tea, but this time also brought a glass of red wine for David. I thought you might need something stronger today, she said with an understanding smile. Thank you. I really do. David accepted the glass, watching how Claire settled into the armchair, elegant and serene even after a full day of work. David, I want Adapter Soys, Helena, Sarah, Isabella, Emily, Gabriel, Ethan, Gaby, Ethan, Clarice, Claire, Rafael Mendonça, David Anderson, Dona Margarete, Mrs. Johnson, Seu Antonia, Mr. Thompson. Please know that my suggestion this afternoon was not impulsive, she said, breaking the silence. I've been thinking a lot about our future, about the future of the children, and you've come to the conclusion that marriage would be the solution. I've concluded that we work well together, as a team, as a family, as partners. Claire looked directly into his eyes. I know you're still processing the loss of Sarah, and I don't expect to replace her. But I can be a companion, a mother to Emily, a wife in the broadest sense of the word. David took a sip of wine, feeling the liquid warm his throat. And Ethan? How would he feel? Ethan already sees you as a father. He asked me last week if you could officially adopt him. Claire smiled. To him, we are already a family. The revelation touched David deeply. Ethan, with his sweet personality and precocious intelligence, had truly become like a son to him. Claire, I need to be honest with you. Since Sarah's death, I haven't allowed myself to think about relationships or marriage. But our time together it's been good, she gently completed. It's been natural, and that's rare, David. To find someone with whom you can build a life without drama, without unnecessary complications. They talked late into the night, exploring all the practical and emotional aspects of the proposal. Claire was pragmatic and convincing, presenting arguments about financial stability, the children's education, and the importance of a solid family structure. When she finally went up to her room, David found himself imagining what it would be like to wake up every morning, knowing that Claire was there not just as a colleague, but as a wife. The idea, which should have scared him, actually brought a strange sense of relief and anticipation. In the next room, Ethan took a long time to fall asleep. He had heard fragments of the conversation between his mother and David, and although he didn't fully understand what they were talking about, he knew something important was being decided. His childlike mind tried to process the changes he felt in the air, unable to name the discomfort that grew in his chest every time he observed the special care his mother gave to Emily. But for now, Ethan kept his observations to himself, as a sensible child does when witnessing adult conversations that he cannot yet fully comprehend. 3 weeks after the conversation that would change the course of their lives, David made his decision one September morning when he watched Emily and Ethan playing in the garden, while Claire tended to the plants with her usual dedication. The domestic scene, so natural and harmonious, made any remaining doubts dissipate from his mind. Claire, can we talk? David said, approaching her as she watered Sarah's orchids with delicate and precise movements. Of course, she replied, turning off the hose and facing him with that serene expression that always conveyed security. She wore a simple yellow cotton dress that accentuated her lightly tanned skin, and her hair was styled in a side braid with a few loose strands framing her face. I accept your proposal, David said directly, watching as her eyes lit up instantly. Are you sure? Claire asked, but the smile that blossomed on her lips revealed a deep satisfaction. I don't want you to feel pressured by anything I said. I'm sure. You're right about everything. We function as a family, the kids are happy, and David hesitated for a moment. I feel whole again when we're all together." Claire moved closer to him, her brown eyes shining with an emotion that David interpreted as genuine joy. "David, you have no idea how happy this makes me. I promise I will be a good wife, a good mother to Emily." "I know you will." David took her hands in his, noticing how soft and well cared for they were. "But I want this to be more than just convenience. I want us to build something real." "That's what I desire most," Claire whispered, and for the first time since they met, she leaned forward and gently kissed his lips. The kiss was tender, almost chaste, but it sparked a reaction that David hadn't experienced in months. When they pulled apart, he saw in her eyes a promise that this marriage could truly become something special. "Daddy, Claire!" Emily shouted from the garden, interrupting the intimate moment. They naturally stepped back, but David noticed how Claire discreetly licked her lips, as if wanting to savor the moment a little longer. Ethan had built an elaborate city using toy blocks, twigs, and small stones. In the center of the construction were two toy figures, a man and a woman, surrounded by two smaller figures. "It's our family," Ethan announced proudly, pointing to the figures. "Uncle David, Mommy, me, and Isa. We all live together in the prettiest house in the city." David and Claire exchanged a meaningful glance over the children's heads. It was as if the universe was conspiring to confirm that this decision was the right one. "Ethan, how beautiful!" Emily exclaimed, crouching down to examine the details of the construction. "Look how you made the little windows just right." "And this is Daddy's office," Ethan continued, pointing to a separate structure. "And this is Mommy's kitchen, where she makes the delicious food." The naturalness with which Ethan referred to David as Daddy and to Emily as sister deeply touched the architect's heart. That boy had truly found a family, just as he himself had found a new chance at happiness. "Kids, I have some news for you," David said, sitting down on the ground next to them. Claire elegantly settled on the grass, adjusting her dress over her legs. "What news?" Emily asked, her green eyes shining with curiosity. "Claire and I have decided to get married," David announced, watching closely for the children's reactions. Ethan jumped for joy, clapping his hands. "Really? So Mommy will be your real wife and I'll be your real son?" "If you want to, yes," David smiled, feeling his heart warm with the boy's enthusiasm. Emily, however, remained silent for a few moments, processing the information. Claire leaned in her direction, gently touching her knee. "Emily, how do you feel about this?" Claire asked delicately. "I want you to know that I will never try to replace your mother. She will always be the mother who brought you into this world and loved you unconditionally." Emily looked into Claire's eyes, then at David, and finally at Ethan, who was watching her anxiously. I think it's good," she said slowly. "You already take care of each other. And Ethan is already like my little brother." She paused. "But can I still call you Claire? I don't feel ready to call anyone Mom yet." "Of course, dear. For as long as you want," Claire replied, and David noticed that there were tears of emotion in her eyes. "So when is the wedding going to be?" Ethan asked, bouncing with excitement. "Well, we still need to plan everything," David laughed. "But we're thinking of something simple just for family. We can do it right here in the garden," Emily suggested, getting excited about the idea. "That would be beautiful. Can I help with the decorations?" "That would be perfect," Claire agreed. "An intimate wedding, at home, surrounded by those we love." The rest of the morning was spent planning the wedding details. Claire suggested a ceremony for the end of October, arguing that it would give enough time to organize everything without rushing. Emily volunteered to be the maid of honor, while Ethan would be the ring bearer. "We need to let Grandma Margaret know," Emily reminded, referring to Sarah's mother. "She'll be surprised, but I think she'll like Claire." David felt a knot in his stomach at the thought of his ex-mother-in-law's reaction. Margaret had been a second mother to him, but since Sarah's death, their relationship had become distant and formal. Telling her about the wedding would be a delicate challenge. "I'll call her tonight," David promised, "and I also need to tell my parents." "They'll love Claire," Emily said confidently. Grandpa Paul will be thrilled with the dishes she cooks. During lunch, the atmosphere in the house was one of contained celebration. Claire had prepared a special dish, grilled salmon with passion fruit sauce, and even opened a bottle of sparkling wine to toast the engagement. "To our family," David raised his glass, looking at each person at the table. "To our family," Claire echoed, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made David feel truly connected to her for the first time. Emily and Ethan toasted with grape juice in crystal glasses that Claire had brought especially for the occasion. The teenager seemed genuinely happy, more excited than David had seen her in months. After lunch, while Emily was showing Ethan how to use the computer to search for wedding decoration ideas, David and Claire retreated to the office to discuss the practical aspects of their union. "We need to talk about legal matters," David said, opening a drawer in the desk where he kept important documents. "Will, inheritance, custody of Ethan." "David, I want you to know that I have no interest in your fortune," Claire said firmly. "We can do a prenuptial agreement if that makes you feel more comfortable." "That's not it," David replied quickly. "Actually, I want to include you and Ethan in my will. If something happens to me, I want to make sure you are protected." The generosity of the proposal seemed to deeply move Claire. "You are a very good man, David. Emily is lucky to have a father like you." "And I am lucky to have found you," David replied, surprising himself with the sincerity of his own feelings. That afternoon, while Claire took the kids to buy decoration supplies, David called Margaret. The conversation was as difficult as he had expected. "Wedding," Margaret repeated, her voice heavy with shock, and David realized a hint of hurt. "David, Sarah died less than a year ago." "I know, Margaret. Believe me, I've thought a lot about this." David tried to keep his voice calm and respectful. "But Claire has been instrumental in Emily's recovery, and the kids already see each other as siblings." "The kids," Margaret sighed heavily. "How is Emily handling this?" "Better than I expected. She really likes Claire and Ethan." David paused. "Margaret, I know it's hard to accept, but Sarah won't be coming back. And I need to move forward, for Emily and for myself." There was a long silence before Margaret responded. "You are right. I'm sorry if I sounded selfish. It's just that Sarah was my only daughter, and Emily will always be your granddaughter. That will never change," David assured her. "Claire understands this and completely respects your relationship with Emily." "I would like to meet her before the wedding," Margaret finally said. "Of course. How about dinner with us next Sunday?" When he hung up the phone, David felt relieved. The first obstacle had been overcome. The call to his parents was much easier. Paul and Carmen Anderson expressed surprise, but mainly relief, to know their son was rebuilding his life. When Claire and the kids returned from shopping, carrying bags full of ribbons, artificial flowers, and delicate fabrics, David felt truly at peace with his decision. He watched Claire guide the kids in organizing the materials, her voice patient and loving, her movements graceful and precise. That night, after Ethan and Emily went to bed, David and Claire sat on the porch, watching the city lights spread out to the horizon. She had changed from her dress into a blue silk nightgown that accentuated her discreet curves, and her hair fell loosely over her shoulders. "I can't believe this is really happening," Claire said softly, her head resting on his shoulder. "Me neither," David admitted, feeling more relaxed and happy than he had in a long time. "But it feels right, natural." "It is natural," she agreed, raising. David turned his face to look at her. "We are two people who complement each other, Emily. Together, we can give the children the stability and love they need." When they kissed again that night, David felt he was truly beginning a new chapter in his life. a chapter that promised to be filled with love, family, and finally happiness again. What he didn't know was that, in the room next door, Ethan was still awake, his small eyes fixed on the ceiling, a worried expression on his young face. There was something that deeply troubled him about the recent events, something that his 7-year-old mind couldn't fully articulate, but that made him feel restless and alert. And in his innocence, Ethan began to pay even more attention to the details that the adults, blinded by the apparent perfection of the situation, overlooked. The chosen October Sunday for the wedding dawned with a crystal blue sky and a gentle breeze that delicately moved the curtains of the penthouse. David woke up with a strange feeling, a mix of anxiety and anticipation he hadn't experienced since his first marriage to Sarah 15 years ago. Claire had spent the previous night in the guest room, following the tradition that the bride and groom should not see each other before the ceremony. When David went down to the kitchen at 7 in the morning, he found Ethan already awake, sitting at the table with a glass of milk and a thoughtful expression that seemed strangely mature for his 7 years. "Good morning, champ." Excited. "For today?" David asked, affectionately ruffling the boy's dark hair. "Good morning, Dad David," Ethan replied, using the hybrid title he had created. "Are you nervous?" "A little bit. It's normal to be nervous on your wedding day," David admitted while preparing his coffee. "And you? How are you feeling?" Ethan took a moment to respond, thoughtfully stirring his milk with a small spoon. "I wanted to ask you something." "Sure, ask me anything." "Do you love my mom?" The question came out direct and straightforward, with the brutal honesty that only children possess. David stopped what he was doing and sat down in the chair next to Ethan. It was a complicated question, deserving an honest but age-appropriate answer. "Ethan, love comes in many different forms. I love your mum as a partner, as someone who takes very good care of our family. It's a different love than what I felt for Emily's mother, but it's real and true," David explained carefully. Ethan nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. "My mum said that you two will love each other more over time." "Your mum is a very wise woman," David smiled. "And you? How do you feel about having Emily as your official sister starting today?" "I like Emily. She's nice to me," Ethan said, but there was something in his voice that David couldn't quite identify. "Dad David, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course." Ethan looked around to make sure they were alone, then leaned in towards David. "Sometimes I see my mum putting things in Emily's food that she doesn't put in ours." David felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of things, Ethan?" "I don't know. She takes some small bottles from the high cupboard and puts a few drops in Emily's tea and smoothie. When I ask, she says they are special vitamins for teenagers," Ethan explained, his big, sincere eyes wide. "But why does Emily need different vitamins than ours?" Before David could respond, Emily came down the stairs wearing a pink silk robe, her hair in rollers to create curls for the ceremony. "Good morning, family," she said cheerfully, but David noticed that she moved a little slower than usual and her eyes seemed slightly glazed. "Good morning, Princess. How do you feel on Dad's wedding day?" David asked, watching her closely. "I'm happy. Claire is going to be officially part of our family," Emily replied, pouring herself some orange juice. "Has she made my morning smoothie yet?" "She hasn't come down yet. I think she's getting ready," David said, noticing how Emily seemed to automatically look for the special smoothie that Claire prepared every morning. "I'll go upstairs to see if she needs help," Emily said, heading toward the stairs. When she was out of sight, David turned back to Ethan. "Ethan, can you show me those little bottles your mum uses?" Ethan hesitated, clearly torn between loyalty to his mother and trust in David. "You're not going to get mad at her, are you?" "I'm not going to get mad. I'm just curious," David lied, trying to keep his voice calm. Ethan led him to the kitchen and pointed to the high cupboard where Claire kept special spices. David opened the cupboard and found, hidden behind the jars of herbs, 3 small unlabeled bottles containing clear liquids. "These are the ones," Ethan whispered. David picked up one of the bottles and examined it against the light. The liquid was colorless and odorless, but there was something about its consistency that felt pharmaceutical. His heart began to race when he heard footsteps coming down the stairs. "David! Ethan! Where are you?" Claire's voice echoed down the hallway. David quickly put the bottle back in the cupboard and signaled for Ethan to be quiet. "Here, in the kitchen, love." Claire appeared at the kitchen door, wearing an elegant and simple white satin dress that accentuated her curves without being over the top. Her hair was styled in a low bun, adorned with small white flowers, and she wore a delicate pearl necklace that had belonged to her mother. "You look beautiful," David said, but his voice sounded slightly forced. "Thank you," Claire smiled, moving closer to him for a soft kiss. "You look very dapper, too." David had chosen a classic navy blue suit with a silver tie, and he truly looked impeccable. But his mind was elsewhere, processing what Ethan had revealed. "Mommy, you look like a princess," Ethan exclaimed, running to hug Claire. "Thank you, my love." "You look very handsome too," she said, adjusting the boy's blue tie. "Where's Emily?" "She went upstairs." "I think she's finishing getting ready," David replied. "I'll quickly prepare her smoothie before the guests arrive," Claire said, heading to the fridge. David watched closely as she prepared the usual blend of fruits, yogurt, and supplements. When she opened the tall cabinet to grab what would presumably be another one of the mysterious bottles, David intervened. "Claire, on the day of our wedding, how about we set aside the usual routines? We can have a special breakfast together." Claire paused what she was doing and turned to him with an expression that David couldn't decipher. "But David, Emily is used to her smoothie. She might feel unwell if she doesn't have it." "Used to it? How?" David asked, trying to keep his tone casual. "Well, her body has adapted to the nutrients. It's like any regular supplement," Claire explained, but David noticed a slight tension in her voice. "Mom, what's in those little bottles you use?" Ethan suddenly asked, his childlike curiosity overcoming any caution. Claire froze for a moment, her eyes darting quickly between Ethan and David. "They're special vitamin concentrates, Ethan. I've explained this to you before." "But why don't they have labels?" Ethan insisted. "Ethan, don't question your mother on our wedding day," David interjected, although internally he was grateful for the boy's persistence. At that moment, Emily came down the stairs, wearing a lilac dress that accentuated her green eyes. She looked truly beautiful, but David noticed she was holding on to the railing as if she needed support. "Wow, what a beautiful family!" she exclaimed, smiling at everyone. "Claire, you look perfect. You look like a movie bride." "Thank you, dear." "You look stunning too," Claire replied, but her eyes remained watchful. "Your smoothie is ready." "Oh, great. I was missing it," Emily said, accepting the glass that Claire offered her. David watched his daughter drink the mixture, feeling a knot in his stomach. If there was really something wrong with those supplements, he was allowing it to continue. But it was his wedding day. Guests were arriving in 2 hours, and he couldn't create a scandal based solely on the observations of a 7-year-old. "Well, let's get ready to welcome our guests," Claire said, returning to her usual efficient mode. "Ethan, go brush your teeth. Emily, can you help me with the floral arrangements?" The next 2 hours passed in a whirlwind of preparations. The rooftop garden had been transformed into a fairy tale setting, with white draped fabrics, white and lilac flowers, and a small area reserved for the ceremony overlooking the city. Guests began to arrive at noon. David had opted for an intimate ceremony. Just the parents from both sides, Margaret, Sarah's mother, a few close friends, and colleagues. In total, about 20 people settled into elegant chairs arranged in a semicircle. Margaret arrived wearing an elegant navy blue outfit, her grey hair impeccably styled. She greeted David with a warm hug, But when she was introduced to Claire, David noticed a careful evaluation in his ex-mother-in-law's gaze. "Claire, nice to meet you. David has told me wonderful things about you," Margaret said, offering a diplomatic smile. "The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Margaret. I know how much you mean to Emily. I hope we can be friends," Claire replied with her usual elegance. "I'm sure we will," Margaret responded, but David noticed she was watching Claire with the attention of someone forming an opinion. The ceremony was conducted by a family friend who was a justice of the peace, and it unfolded simply and emotionally. When it came time for the vows, David felt genuine emotion as he looked at Claire, beautiful and serene beside him. "Claire, I promise to be a devoted partner, a loving father to Ethan, and to build with you a family based on respect, affection, and understanding," David said, holding her hands. "David, I promise to take care of you and Emily, to be a devoted wife and a present mother." "I promise that our family will be my absolute priority," Claire replied, her eyes shining with tears of emotion. When the justice declared them husband and wife, and they kissed, sealing their union, David felt that he was truly beginning a new life. The applause from the guests, the smiles from Emily and Ethan, the feeling of completeness, everything felt perfect. During the small reception that followed, with sophisticated appetizers that Claire had personally prepared, David circulated among the guests, receiving congratulations and observing his new family. Emily was chatting animatedly with her younger cousins, although he noticed she often sat down, as if she were tired. Ethan stayed close to David, behaving like the proud son he truly was. But throughout the event, David noticed that the boy kept a watchful eye on his mother, as if he were guarding secrets he didn't know how to reveal. "David, you look very happy," commented Lisa, his secretary, who had become a dear friend over the years. "I am happy. Claire has brought new life to our family," David replied sincerely. "She is truly special. And Emily seems to adore her," Lisa observed, "though I think she looks a bit pale today. Maybe it's the excitement of the wedding." David looked at his daughter, who at that moment was laughing at something Ethan had said. But he noticed that Lisa was right. There was a paleness to her face that hadn't been there in the morning. When night fell and the last guests departed, the new Anderson-Smith family gathered in the living room. Claire had changed out of her wedding dress into a stylish casual outfit, and she looked radiant with happiness. "It was a perfect day," she said, sitting next to David on the sofa. "Thank you for giving me this family. Thank you for accepting our chaos," David laughed, pulling her closer. Emily, I was lying on the rug next to Ethan, yawning loudly. "I'm exhausted. I think I'm going to bed early tonight." "Good idea, Princess." "It was a long day for everyone," David agreed. After the kids went to their rooms, David and Claire finally had some time alone as husband and wife. Sitting on the porch under the stars, they shared a bottle of champagne and talked about their plans for the future. "David, there's something I need to tell you," Claire said after the second glass, her voice suddenly serious. "What is it?" David asked, feeling a twinge of apprehension. "I love you, truly. It's not just convenience or gratitude. At some point over the last few months, I fell in love with you," she confessed, her eyes shining in the soft light of the porch. David felt a wave of relief and happiness. "I love you too, Claire. I didn't know if it was right to feel this way, but it's real." When they kissed that night, it was with the passion of a truly in-love couple, not just the practical partnership that had begun their relationship. Later, when they retreated to the bedroom, now officially shared, David felt truly at peace. Claire was his wife, Ethan was his son, and Emily seemed happy with the new family arrangement. What he didn't know was that, in the room next door, Ethan remained awake, his ears attuned to the sounds of the house, his young mind trying to process the growing feeling that something was deeply wrong with the special care his mother was giving Emily. And in Emily's room, the teenager was sleeping a deep and artificial sleep, her body unconsciously processing substances that gradually altered her brain chemistry, creating a subtle but real dependence on the person who now had unrestricted access to her life. The full moon illuminated the silent apartment, a mute witness to the beginning of a union that, beneath its apparent perfection, hid secrets that would soon come to light in ways no one could predict. The first months of marriage passed like an extended honeymoon. David had never imagined he could feel so complete again. Claire adapted to the role of wife with the same perfection she had shown as a housekeeper, and the house ran like a Swiss clock under her management. It was early January when everything began to crumble, starting with an apparently innocent discovery by Ethan on a sunny Saturday morning. While David worked on his projects and Claire went out grocery shopping, Ethan decided to play detective, a game that had become his obsession since he received an investigation kit for Christmas. Emily slept in late, as had become her habit on weekends, and the house was quiet. Ethan, having just turned 8 in December, and with a curiosity that seemed to grow each day, decided to explore the kitchen in more detail. He had always been an observant child, but recently his observations had become almost a compulsion. There was something about his mother's habits that deeply unsettled him, although he couldn't quite articulate what it was. Using a chair to reach the high cabinet where Claire kept the special spices, Ethan discovered something that made his heart race. In addition to the 3 small unlabeled bottles he already knew, there was a 4th, larger bottle with a handwritten label that he managed to read slowly, for E, 5 drops twice a day. E was clearly Emily, and 5 drops twice a day sounded like a medical instruction. With trembling hands, Ethan picked up the bottle and examined it against the light. The liquid inside was slightly yellowish, unlike the others that were clear. When he opened the cap, a strong chemical odor hit his nostrils, making him cough. "This isn't a vitamin," Ethan murmured to himself, his suspicions finally finding confirmation. Determined to uncover the truth, Ethan climbed down from the chair and began searching for other hiding places. That's when he found, at the bottom of a drawer that Claire always kept locked but was open at that moment, a small notebook with detailed notes. The words were difficult for an 8-year-old, but Ethan managed to decipher a few. Gradual dependence, reduced resistance, increased trust, and more frighteningly, isolation from father, slow progress. Ethan didn't fully understand what those words meant, but he knew something was very wrong. His mother was doing something bad to Emily, and that explained why his sister had become so sleepy and dependent in recent months. With his heart pounding, Ethan took pictures of the notebook pages with the tablet he used for drawing, a skill he had learned by watching adults. Then, carefully putting everything back in place, he climbed down from the chair. When David appeared in the kitchen looking for coffee, he found Ethan sitting at the table with an expression too serious for a child. "Good morning, champ. Why the worried face?" David asked, pouring himself coffee from the thermos that Claire always left prepared. Ethan hesitated for a moment, his small face contorted in an expression of internal conflict. Finally, he made a decision that would change everything. "Dad, David, I need to show you something very important," Ethan said, his voice trembling but determined. "What is it, son?" Ethan looked around to make sure they were alone, then pulled David by the hand to the living room table where he had left the tablet. With small but precise fingers, he showed the photos he had taken. "I found this in Mom's notebook," Ethan said, watching David's reaction closely. David took the tablet and examined the images. As he read the notes, his face lost color. The words jumped off the screen like accusations. Substance X, effective for behavioral control. E shows signs of increasing emotional dependence. R, unaware. Continue protocol. "Ethan, where exactly did you find this?" David asked, his voice low and controlled, although internally he felt a whirlwind of emotions. "In the kitchen drawer that she always keeps it locked. She forgot to lock it today," Ethan explained. "Dad, David, I also found the little bottles with the medicine that she puts in Emily's food." David felt as if the ground was opening up beneath his feet. All the little observations he had ignored, all the coincidences he had attributed to chance, suddenly aligned to form a terrible pattern. "Ethan, are you absolutely sure about what you're showing me?" David asked, needing to confirm before taking any action. I am. And there's more, Ethan said, showing other photos he had taken of the bottles. This one says, for E, 5 drops 2x a day. That's for Emily, isn't it? David nodded, feeling nauseous. Ethan, you did very well to tell me this. Can you be a very brave boy and help me protect Emily? I can, Ethan replied immediately. Emily is my sister. I don't want anyone to hurt her. Then here's what we're going to do, David said, crouching down to be at eye level with Ethan. You can't tell your mom that you showed me this. It's very important that she doesn't know we found out. Can you keep this secret? Ethan solemnly nodded. I can. But what are you going to do? I'm going to protect our family, David said, even though he still didn't know exactly how. At that moment, they heard the key turning in the lock of the front door. Claire had returned from shopping. Quickly, Ethan, go to your room and act normal. Don't let anything slip, David whispered urgently. Ethan immediately obeyed, climbing the stairs with his light childlike steps. David, in turn, deleted the photos from the tablet and tried to compose a normal expression when Claire entered the room carrying shopping bags. Good morning, love, Claire said, approaching him for a morning kiss. Titi, how's your morning going? Oh, calm, just doing a bit of work, David replied, forcing a smile. Ethan is playing in his room, and Emily is still sleeping. Great, I'm going to prepare a special lunch. I bought fresh salmon, Claire said, heading to the kitchen. David watched her move around the kitchen with her usual efficiency, organizing the groceries and checking the cabinets. When she opened the drawer where Ethan had found the notebook, David noticed her movements becoming more tense. She quickly checked the contents, and by the relief that passed over her face, it was obvious that nothing seemed to have been disturbed. David, can you call the kids for lunch in 15 minutes? Claire asked, starting to prepare the meal. Sure, David replied, but his eyes were fixed on every move she made. When Claire opened the high cabinet and took one of the unlabeled bottles, David felt a wave of anger mixed with horror. She had been drugging their daughter right in front of him for months. During lunch, David watched Emily closely. His daughter, who at 15 should be full of energy and opinions, seemed apathetic and drowsy. She answered questions with monosyllables and ate mechanically as if on autopilot. Emily, how do you feel today? David asked directly. Fine, Dad. Just a little tired, Emily replied, but her voice sounded distant. Did Claire already prepare my afternoon smoothie? Of course, sweetheart. It's in the fridge, Claire replied promptly. Ethan, sitting next to David, exchanged a meaningful glance with him. It was obvious that Emily's dependency on Claire's supplements was much more than just a habit. After lunch, when Claire went upstairs to organize the laundry, David took the opportunity to have a serious conversation with Ethan. Ethan, I need your help to save Emily, but it's going to be dangerous, and you need to be very, very brave. Do you still want to help me? I do, Dad, David, Ethan replied without hesitation. Then here's the plan. David carefully explained to Ethan how they would gather evidence without raising suspicion. Ethan was to continue observing and documenting everything he could, while David would investigate Claire's past and seek professional help. But Dad, David, Ethan asked with the brutal innocence of children, if my mom is hurting Emily, is she also a bad person? The question hit David like a punch. Ethan was being forced to confront the possibility that his own mother was a criminal. It was too heavy a burden for an 8-year-old. Ethan, sometimes the people we love do wrong things. That doesn't mean they are completely bad, but it means we need to protect those who are being hurt, David explained carefully. And what if she finds out we're investigating? She won't find out because you're very smart and brave, and I'm going to protect you, no matter what happens. That afternoon, while Claire took Emily for a routine doctor's appointment, David seized the opportunity to make some crucial calls. First, he called a private investigator recommended by a lawyer friend. Then he contacted Dr. Smith, Emily's pediatrician. Doctor, I need to ask some questions about the symptoms Emily has been showing. Is it possible that she is being medicated without my knowledge? David, that's a very serious accusation. Do you have any evidence? Dr. Smith asked, his voice immediately taking on a professional and concerned tone. I'm gathering evidence now. But hypothetically, what kind of substance could cause chronic drowsiness, emotional dependency, and apathy in a teenager? Well, there are several possibilities. Low doses of benzodiazepines, some tricyclic antidepressants, even certain antihistamines in specific combinations. David, if you suspect someone is drugging Emily, you need to act immediately. I am acting, but I need solid evidence before making any accusations. When Claire and Emily returned from the doctor's appointment, David greeted them with a forced smile. Emily looked even sleepier than usual, and David wondered if Claire had increased the dosage of the substances. "How was the appointment?" David asked. "Everything was normal. Dr. Smith said Emily is healthy, just a little anemic. He prescribed some more vitamins," Claire replied, showing a prescription. David examined the prescription and he saw that they were just regular vitamins. But that didn't mean Claire wasn't adding other things to the supplements. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, David stayed awake planning his next steps. Tomorrow, the private detective would begin investigating Claire's past. He would also collect samples of the substances she was using for laboratory analysis. The most important thing was to protect Emily without alerting Claire. David knew that if she suspected she had been discovered, she could become dangerous or simply disappear, taking Ethan with her. Meanwhile, in the next room, Ethan lay awake, his little heart heavy with the knowledge that his mother was not the person he thought she was. But his determination to protect Emily was stronger than his confusion and pain. And in her room, Emily was sleeping a deep, artificial sleep, unaware that she was a victim of a crime that had been committed daily, right under her father's nose. The truth was finally beginning to emerge, but the danger was just starting. On the Monday following Ethan's discovery, David woke up before dawn with a meticulously crafted plan. At 5:30 in the morning, while Claire was still sound asleep beside him, he quietly got up and went downstairs to the kitchen. Ethan was already waiting for him, sitting at the table with a determined expression that contrasted with his childish appearance. "Did you get it?" David whispered. Ethan nodded and handed David a small vial he had managed to take from the cabinet during the night. "This one says for I. I got it without her noticing." David examined the vial against the morning light. The yellowish liquid had an oily consistency and a subtle chemical odor that definitely wasn't from any natural vitamin. He carefully poured a small amount into a sterile container he had prepared the night before. "Ethan, you are the bravest boy I know," David said, hugging the boy. "Now, very important, put the vial back exactly where it was and act normal. This afternoon, when your mother takes Emily to piano class, I will examine everything more closely." "What if she finds out there's liquid missing from the vial?" Ethan asked, showing impressive cunning for his age. "You're right. I'll top off the volume with distilled water. She won't notice the difference right away," David replied, admiring the boy's intelligence. At 7 o'clock, when Claire came downstairs to prepare breakfast, she found David and Ethan talking about architectural designs. An apparently innocent scene that raised no suspicion. "Good morning, my loves," Claire said, kissing David and affectionately ruffling Ethan's hair. "Did you sleep well?" "Very well." "And you look radiant today," David replied, forcing normalcy into his voice. Claire was wearing a light blue dress that accentuated her eyes, and she really did look radiant. There was nothing in her appearance or behavior that suggested she was capable of the crimes David now knew she was committing. This superficial normalcy made the whole situation even more disturbing. During breakfast, David watched closely as Claire prepared Emily's morning smoothie. She opened the tall cabinet, took the vial that Ethan had tampered with during the night, and added exactly 5 drops to the smoothie glass, just as indicated on the handwritten label. "Emily, your special smoothie is ready," Claire called when Emily came down the stairs. Emily appeared wearing her school uniform, but her movements were slow and awkward. She sat at the table and automatically reached for the smoothie glass, like an addict reaching for their first dose of the day. "Thank you, Claire." "I don't know what I'd do without these smoothies," Emily said, drinking the liquid in large gulps. The phrase hit David like a knife. His daughter had developed a real dependency on the substances Claire was administering. What had started as a suspicion was now confirming itself as a real nightmare. "You're welcome, dear. I just want you to feel good and healthy," Claire replied with a smile that to David now seemed sinister. After breakfast, David said goodbye to the family as he did every morning. But instead of going directly to the office, he headed to the private lab he had contacted on Sunday. He submitted the liquid sample for urgent analysis, paying extra to have the results the same day. "I need to know exactly what substance this is and in what concentration," David explained to the technician in charge. "It's a matter of life and death." "You'll have the results by 5 o'clock, the technician assured him. David then met with Marcus Rivera, the private detective recommended by his lawyer. Marcus was a man in his 50s, a former police officer with 20 years of experience in complex investigations. "David, the preliminary information I've gathered about Claire Smith is concerning," Marcus said, opening a folder full of documents. "Her real name is Claire Johnson. Smith is a false name she has been using for the last 5 years. False? What do you mean? She has a history of relationships with widowed or recently divorced men, always in comfortable financial situations. In 2018, she worked for a family in San Jose. The patriarch, a 60-year-old widower, died suddenly 3 months after she moved into the house." David felt the blood run cold in his veins. "How did he die?" "Heart failure. Nothing was investigated because he had a history of heart problems. But here's the interesting part. His teenage daughter developed a strange dependency on Claire. When the family questioned some suspicious behaviors, Claire simply disappeared, taking some valuables with her. And before that, in 2016, the same situation in Riverside. Widower, teenage daughter, strange behavior from the girl, sudden disappearance of the housekeeper. The pattern repeats itself in at least 4 different cities over the last 6 years. David leaned back in his chair, feeling physically ill. "And Ethan, is he really her son?" "I'm still investigating that. But I found something interesting. In none of the previous records show her with a child. Ethan may have been acquired to lend more credibility to her story. The possibility that Ethan could have been kidnapped or bought made David feel a wave of murderous rage. That sweet and brave child could be the victim of an even more horrific crime. "Marcus, I need concrete evidence, something that can lead to her arrest. I'm working on it. But David, you need to be very careful. If she suspects she's been discovered, she could be extremely dangerous. Women like her, when cornered, are capable of anything." David spent the rest of the morning in the office trying to maintain normalcy, but his mind was completely focused on the situation at home. At 3 in the afternoon, he called home with some excuse. "Claire, how are things over there?" "Everything's fine, love. Emily is at school, Ethan is drawing, and I'm organizing some closets," Claire replied in her usual sweet voice. "Great, I'll be home a little later today. I have an important meeting." "No problem. Dinner at 8, as always." When he hung up the phone, David realized his hands were shaking. How had he been so blind? How had he not noticed he was living with a criminal who was systematically poisoning his daughter? At 5 in the afternoon, David received a call from the lab with results that confirmed his worst fears. "Mr. Anderson, the substance you brought contains a combination of lorazepam and trazodone in significant concentrations. It's a mixture that causes sedation, reduces anxiety, and with prolonged use, leads to physical and emotional dependence." "Are these medications dangerous?" "In therapeutic doses and with medical supervision, no. But administered secretly and without control, they can cause permanent neurological damage, especially in teenagers whose brains are still developing." David hung up the phone, feeling simultaneously relieved to have confirmation and horrified by the extent of the crime being committed against his daughter. At 6 in the evening, he arrived home earlier than announced, hoping to catch Claire off guard. He found Ethan in the garden, playing alone, and Emily sleeping on the living room sofa, a heavy and unnatural sleep for the middle of the afternoon. "Where's your mom?" David asked Ethan. "In the bedroom, going through some boxes," Ethan replied, and David noticed anxiety in his voice. David quietly climbed the stairs and found the bedroom door ajar. Through the crack, he saw Claire organizing a suitcase and speaking softly on the phone. "Yes, I need to leave Los Angeles quickly. Can you arrange the documentation for Portland?" "No, just me and the boy this time." "Understood until tomorrow night." David's heart raced. Claire was planning to flee, and she intended to take Ethan, who possibly wasn't even her son. He quietly descended the stairs and found Ethan still in the garden. "Ethan, did your mom say anything about a trip?" "Not to me. But last night I heard her talking to someone about next job," Ethan whispered. "Daddy David, do you think she will take me away from you?" The question broke David's heart. Ethan had found a true family with them, and the possibility of losing it was terrifying for the child. "I'm not going to let that happen, son. I promise." That night during dinner, David watched Claire closely. She seemed nervous, even though she tried to maintain her mask of normalcy. Her hands trembled slightly as she served the food, and she avoided direct eye contact. "Claire, is everything okay?" "You seem tense," David commented. "I'm just a little tired." "It's been a long day," she replied, but her voice sounded forced. Emily could barely keep her eyes open during the meal, and when she tried to get up from the table, she stumbled slightly. The effect of the drugs was clearly stronger than usual. "Dad, I think I'm going to sleep early tonight." "I feel strange," Emily murmured. "Of course, Princess." "Rest well," David said, but internally he was in a panic. Claire had increased the dosage, possibly preparing for something. After Emily went upstairs, David waited for Claire to take a shower to have a crucial conversation with Ethan. "Ethan, I think your mom is planning to leave. Do you want to stay with us or go with her?" Ethan didn't hesitate for a second. "I want to stay with you. You are my real family." "Then I need to ask you something very important, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Is Claire really your biological mother?" Ethan lowered his head, and when he raised it again, his eyes were filled with tears. "I don't know. I don't remember before her. But sometimes I have dreams of a different woman who called me by another name." The confirmation of David's suspicions hit him like a punch to the stomach. Ethan was most likely a kidnapped or bought child being used as part of Claire's criminal scheme. "Ethan, tomorrow things are going to change very quickly. You need to trust me completely, no matter what happens. Can you do that?" "I can, Daddy David, just don't abandon me." "I will never abandon you, son. I promise." That night, David could barely sleep, lying next to the woman he now knew to be a dangerous criminal. Claire also seemed restless, tossing and turning in bed and waking up several times. Around 3 in the morning, David heard her get up and quietly go downstairs. He waited a few minutes and followed her, finding her in the kitchen on the phone. "Yes, tomorrow night. Just take the boy. If the girl causes problems, increase the dose." "No, the husband suspects nothing." David hid in the shadow of the hallway, recording the conversation on his phone. Claire was planning something for the next day, and it involved drugging Emily even more and kidnapping Ethan. When she returned to the bedroom, David pretended to be asleep. But his mind was working furiously to devise a plan to protect his family and capture Claire before she could escape or cause more harm. The final confrontation was approaching, and David knew that in the next 24 hours everything would change. His family would be put to the test in a way he had never imagined possible. The truth was finally emerging completely, but the danger had never felt so real and immediate. On Tuesday morning, David woke up at 5 o'clock with his heart racing and a clear plan in mind. Beside him, Claire was sleeping soundly, unaware that it would be her last day in that house. David quietly got up and went downstairs to find Ethan, who was already waiting for him in the kitchen with a small backpack ready. "Are you ready for the most important day of your life, champ?" David whispered, hugging the boy. "I'm ready, Dad David, but I'm scared," Ethan admitted, his big eyes showing a courage that contrasted with his age. "It's normal to be scared. I'm scared too. But today, we're going to save Emily and uncover the truth about you," David said, checking his phone where he had recorded the conversation from the night before. At 7 in the morning, Marcus, the private detective, discreetly arrived at the building accompanied by 2 police officers. David welcomed them in the underground parking lot, away from Claire's eyes. "David, I got a court order for her arrest. The evidence you collected, combined with the history we uncovered, was sufficient," Marcus explained, showing the legal documents. "Regarding Ethan, we have important news." "What news?" "We found his real parents. Ethan's real name is Miguel Santos, and he was kidnapped 3 years ago in Miami. His parents never stopped searching," one of the officers, Detective Cavallo, informed. "The family is on their way to Los Angeles." David felt a mix of joy and sadness. Ethan would finally reunite with his true family, but that meant he would lose the boy, who had become like a son to him. "How is Ethan, Miguel, handling this?" David asked. "He doesn't know yet. We thought it best to wait for his parents to arrive. But David, regardless of what happens, you saved this boy. And he will never forget that," Marcus said. At 8 o'clock, David went back upstairs with an excuse about going to get fresh bread from the bakery. He found Claire preparing breakfast with her usual efficiency, seemingly calm. But David noticed the tension in her movements. "Good morning, love. Did you sleep well?" Claire asked, kissing him on the cheek. "Very well. And you?" "I heard you moving around during the night," David said, testing her reaction. For a fraction of a second, David saw panic in her eyes, but Claire quickly recovered. "I had insomnia. I walked around the house a bit." Ethan appeared in the kitchen dressed for school, but exchanged a meaningful glance with David. The boy was nervous, but determined to play his part in the plan. When Emily came down for breakfast, David was shocked by her appearance. His daughter looked like she had aged years in just a few weeks. Sunken eyes, pale skin, slow and uncoordinated movements. The effects of the drugs were clearly intensifying. "Isa, how do you feel today?" David asked, approaching her with concern. "Strange, Dad. Very tired, but also anxious." "Like something bad is going to happen," Emily replied, her voice weak and confused. David exchanged a glance with Ethan. Even under the influence of drugs, Emily sensed that something was wrong. "Sweetheart, here's your morning vitamin," Claire said, offering the glass as she did every morning. "Actually, Claire, today I'm taking Emily for a special medical appointment." "She doesn't need to take the vitamin," David intervened, questioning Claire's routine openly for the first time. Claire immediately stopped, gripping the glass tightly. "Medical appointment? Why?" "She's fine. I want to investigate this constant fatigue. Dr. Smith suggested some more detailed tests," David lied, watching as Claire became visibly agitated. "David, that's not necessary. Emily just needs more rest and her regular vitamins," Claire insisted, her voice taking on an almost desperate tone. "Thank you for your concern, but as her father, I think it's best to investigate," David said firmly. It was then that Ethan played his part in the plan. With the innocence of a child, he asked loudly, "Mummy, why were you talking about next job on the phone last night?" Claire froze, the vitamin glass trembling in her hands. "Ethan, you must have heard wrong." "I didn't. And why were you packing a suitcase yesterday?" Ethan continued, keeping his innocent expression. The silence that followed was deafening. David saw the exact moment Claire realized she had been caught. Her features transformed, losing all the maternal sweetness she had displayed for months. What emerged was something cold, calculating, and dangerous. "David, I can explain," Claire began, but her voice had lost all familiar warmth. "Explain what?" "How you've been drugging my daughter for months. How your real name is Claire Johnson. How you've had similar relationships with at least 4 other families," David said, rising from the table. The shock on Claire's face was absolute. "How did you—" "Ethan helped me uncover the truth. And before you think about doing something stupid, there are police on the way." Claire looked around like a cornered animal. Suddenly, she threw the vitamin glass to the ground, shattering it, and ran towards the kitchen cabinet where David knew she kept knives. "Ethan, get out now!" David shouted, pushing the boy out of the kitchen. Claire grabbed a large knife and turned to David with an expression he had never seen, completely devoid of any humanity he thought existed in her. "You ruined everything!" she screamed, brandishing the knife. Emily was almost completely under my control. A few more months, and she would have chosen me over you. Why, Claire, why do this to an innocent child? David asked, keeping his distance from her while trying to protect Emily, who was in shock. Because it's easier to manipulate teenagers than adults. They become dependent, submissive, and eventually see me as the only person who really cares about them. Claire explained with a chilling coldness. In a few years, Emily would have chosen me to take care of her and her inheritance. And Ethan, is he really your son? Of course not. I took him when he was 5 years old. Desperate parents sell children for very little. He is just part of the facade. Who suspects a single mother with a small child? The brutal revelation about Ethan made David feel a murderous rage. You are a monster. I am a survivor, Claire shouted, lunging forward with the knife. At that moment, the front door opened and Marcus entered, followed by the police. Police, drop the weapon! Claire turned, momentarily distracted, and David seized the opportunity to disarm her, twisting her wrist until she dropped the knife with a cry of pain. Claire Johnson, you are under arrest for kidnapping, child abuse, administering controlled substances, and attempted murder, Officer Smith announced, putting handcuffs on her. As Claire was taken away by the police, shouting threats and obscenities that starkly contrasted with the sweet woman David thought he knew, Ethan approached him timidly. Daddy David, is it true that I'm not her son? And that my real name isn't Ethan? David knelt down to the boy's level, tears in his eyes. It's true, son. Your real name is Michael, and your biological parents have never stopped looking for you. But can I still be your son too? Ethan asked, his eyes filling with tears. Forever, Michael. You will always be my son, no matter what happens. The weeks that followed were an emotional roller coaster for the entire family. Emily was immediately hospitalized for detox from the drugs she had been taking involuntarily. The doctors confirmed that she had developed a physical dependency, but with proper treatment, she would fully recover. Dr. Smith, will she be okay? David asked during one of the hospital visits. Physically, yes. The substances she was receiving caused dependency, but no permanent damage. Psychologically, she will need therapy to process the trauma of being manipulated this way, the doctor explained. Michael reunited with his biological parents, John and Mary, who traveled from Miami to Los Angeles immediately. The reunion was emotionally devastating. 3 years of separation had left everyone traumatized, but also deeply grateful. How can we thank you for taking care of our son? Mary asked David, crying as she hugged Michael. He saved me as much as I saved him, and I would like you to consider Los Angeles a second home for him. He will always have a family here, David replied. Michael, with the incredible resilience of children, quickly adapted to the new reality. He would maintain regular contact with David and Emily, spending holidays in Los Angeles, but would return to Miami with his biological parents. Daddy David, can I call you every day? Michael asked on the day of departure. You can call as often as you want, my son. And when you grow up, if you want to study architecture, there's a spot reserved in my office. Claire was sentenced to 15 years in prison for multiple crimes. During the trial, more families came forward as victims of similar schemes, revealing that she had operated for over a decade. The defendant demonstrates a consistent pattern of predatory behavior, specifically targeting vulnerable, grieving families, the judge declared during sentencing. This is one of the most insidious forms of abuse I have ever seen in this court. 6 months after Claire's arrest, David and Emily were finally rebuilding their lives. Emily, free from drugs, had regained her vibrant personality and was undergoing therapy to deal with the trauma. Dad, sometimes I feel like I should have realized something was wrong, Emily said during one of their evening talks on the porch. Emily, you were a victim. Claire was a seasoned criminal who knew exactly how to manipulate people. What matters is that we are safe now, David replied, hugging his daughter. And what about Michael? Do you miss him? Every day. But knowing he is with his real family brings me peace, and he promised he would come spend Christmas with us. A year later, David and Emily established a new, healthy routine. They cooked together, talked about everything, and David had drastically reduced his workload to be more present. "Dad, do you think you'll ever get married again?" Emily asked one Sunday afternoon while they prepared lunch together. David paused from chopping vegetables and considered the question carefully. "Honestly, right now I can't imagine trusting someone like that again. But who knows, in the future." "What do you think?" "I think that when the time is right, with the right person, we'll both know," Emily replied wisely. That night, David received a call from Michael, as he did every Tuesday and Friday. "Daddy David, guess what? My biological dad said we can go to Los Angeles for the July holidays." "What wonderful news. Emily is going to be so happy. And how are your studies?" "Very well. And I keep drawing architecture every day. When I grow up, I want to design houses for families who got lost to find each other again." Michael's response touched David's heart deeply. That extraordinary boy had turned his own traumatic experience into a life mission. As he watched the sunset through the window of his office, David reflected on the incredible journey his family had gone through. They had faced unimaginable darkness, but emerged stronger, more united, and with a profound appreciation for truth, trust, and genuine love. The house that once echoed with artificial perfection now resonated with authentic laughter, honest conversations, and the deep bonds that form when people survive crises together. David had learned that true family isn't built on convenience or manipulation, but on courage, honesty, and the willingness to fight for those you love. Emily appeared in the doorway of his office, now 17 and preparing for university applications to study psychology, inspired by her own experience with trauma and recovery. "Dad, dinner is ready, and I have a surprise for you." "What kind of surprise?" "Michael sent a drawing in the mail. It's a portrait of our family, you, me, and him, with the caption, 'Heroes who saved each other.'" David smiled, feeling his heart fill with the kind of contentment that can only come from having survived the worst and discovered that love, in its purest form, is ultimately stronger than any deception. As they walked to the dining room together, father and daughter, survivors and victors, David knew that their story had found its true ending, not in the false perfection of manipulation, but in the messy, beautiful, unshakable truth of real family bonds. Please like, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and if you watched until now, comment "I watched until now," and leave your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the final screen. It's very emotional.